Welcome to Becoming the GC, the podcast that dives deep into the journeys of general counsels and chief legal officers, uncovering the insights and strategies that help define their success. Hosted by Joe Schul, founder of Inside Counsel Academy. We share real-life stories and practical advice from successful GCs, guiding you on your journey to the top. Tune in and discover what it takes to become the exceptional legal leader your organization needs.
I am Joe. Today's guest is Terri Cammarano. Terri had a remarkable career and is a legend in the healthcare community here in California. We talked about her transitions between being a general counsel and a law firm partner, what she looks for when hiring a lawyer into her department, and the upcoming LA Olympics. Stay with me to the end where I'll share my key takeaways from the episode. This show is sponsored by Inside Counsel Academy, where in-house counsel go to elevate their careers while enhancing their lives. And also by General Counsel West, a law firm that supports GCs of healthcare companies and their teams with an inside counsel mindset. Today's guest is Terri Cammarano. She's the Senior Vice President, Legal Affairs and General Counsel at Cedars-Sinai. Cedars-Sinai serves more than 1 million people each year in over 40 locations, with more than 4,500 physicians and nurses and 1,500 research projects in motion. Before joining Cedars, she was a partner with Hooper Lundy and Bookman here in Los Angeles, and prior to that, Terri held the position of Chief Legal Counsel and was a member of the executive leadership team of Memorial Health System in Fountain Valley. Terri, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to be here.
Great. Okay. I want to sort of start at the beginning and ask you what inspired you to pursue law and how did you start your career?
So I always loved policy and politics and, watching how legislation got made. It just interested me. I was the kid who wanted to watch CNN. And there were no lawyers in my immediate family, but on my father's side for generations, there were lawyers. And it skipped a generation with him. So I think it was partially interest and maybe a little bit in my DNA.
Yeah. So you were civic minded as a youngster and sort of no better place to be than, law school to pursue that.
Right. And I love writing and reading. So, that kind of focused me in on something where I would have the opportunity to write and read and really parse things through. I like details. I pay attention to them. And I think that's a good quality for any lawyer.
Certainly. And did you enjoy the law school experience then?
I did. I was broke and had a lot of student debt and was working 2 jobs while I was in law school. So
were you really? How did you do that?
So I got some work at the law school library, and then I just did odd jobs and clerking. As soon as I got through my first year, I was able to clerk. But I had previously worked as a contract administration analyst at the Department of Defense. So I took some odd jobs kind of with defense contractors, clerical jobs, and just kind of pulled it all together so I could get through.
There's nothing like crunching the container to be efficient. You probably weren't wasting a lot of time like the rest of us were.
I had no time for anything other than, sleep, work, go to school, study.
Yeah. And then coming out of law school, what was your first job?
So out of law school, I went to O'Melveny and Myers. Went straight into big law. I had been there over the summer and they were kind enough because I told them I need to work to supplement my scholarships. They were kind enough to let me work part-time during my 3rd year of law school, which was unusual in those days. And it was great. I mean, it was a big firm. I was in a smaller office. So I had a lot of flexibility to work with different partners and in different areas. And those were great days. That was the heyday of big law when you would show up and at your first day and they would give you a raise just for showing up. It was very competitive back then.
Right. Yeah. So take me through your early career, into your mid-career, and what were some of the positive inflection points that helped you along the way?
I think the big law experience really, um, it's hard, it's a lot of pressure, but it trains you to be responsive and it trains you to be timely and it trains you to pay attention to detail. At our firm, typos could get you a write up and nobody wants that. So, the quality of the work that you develop in private practice when clients are paying big firm rates, I think really, really helps you focus on the fact that if a client sees a typo, they might just wonder what else is an error in the message you're sending. So that has stuck with me. And even though, we all do it, everybody makes mistakes. We're just human. It's trained me to always, on important documents, make sure I get a second set of eyes. Hey, could you just take a look at this and read it once through and make sure I didn't say anything stupid or there's not some errant comma in there. And I think that that has stuck with me. The long hours and having to be available 24/7 is one of the prices you pay for big law. And I think for any law these days, people expect their lawyers to be available. And that's just something that comes with the territory of practicing privately.
Yeah, totally. You reminded me, I hadn't thought about it in a long time, but I had a business and technical writing professor in college. And any assignment that we had, if you had a typo or a grammatical error, it was for each one, you got bumped down a whole letter grade on the assignment. And, of course, we thought that was somewhat unreasonable at the time, but now in retrospect, what a gift to have somebody set the standard like that. I feel like in today's world, like we don't have those people as frequently who hold us to that high of a standard in our schooling or maybe even in our jobs. And so you really could benefit from setting that for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What happened next for you?
I really enjoyed working with nonprofits. Because it was a small office, I was able to straddle two departments, corporate and tax. And my favorite work was with the nonprofit clients, universities, museums, a little bit of healthcare, but at that time, O'Melveny wasn't doing a lot of healthcare. This was a long time ago. And one day I was talking with a partner who had been just a great mentor on the tax side. And I said, I really like this nonprofit world. And he said, well, if that's what you really like, you need to focus on healthcare because healthcare is a fee for service industry, unlike many nonprofits. And they actually pay their lawyers and are willing to have a robust legal budget as opposed to, so many of these nonprofits that are small and don't have the revenue for big law. So I took that to heart. And at one point, that partner said to me, don't take this the wrong way because this is about you and what you want to do with your career and how you can excel. But there is a blind ad in the Daily Journal for a healthcare law firm. And I think I know which one it is. And if you went there, you would be working with a lot of nonprofit hospital systems. So you should see what it is. And if I'm wrong, I owe you a bottle of wine. And if I'm right, you owe me a bottle of wine. And it was Weisberg and Aronson.
Okay.
One of the firms that really kind of created healthcare law as a specialty. And so I went to Weisberg, and it turned out to be just such a fabulous move because I was really all in on healthcare. I continued to straddle business law and tax, doing, just a lot of fun work with a lot of fun clients. And Carl Weisberg was a force to be reckoned with. and talk about someone who demanded excellence. And that was painful at times, but I am just so grateful that I had the opportunity to work with people like Carl and Pete Aronson and just, so many people and that are still icons in healthcare law.
You know, I know you have an LLM, but I don't know whether it's in tax or health law, which it could be either one, right? Given your career. Which is it?
It's tax.
It is.
And
Okay.
I went back late in my career to do that. I had always wanted one. And when I was at O'Melveny, the partners said, "You're already in the tax department. What do you need an LLM for?" And when I was at Weisberg, which had become part of Foley and Lardner in the process, I got a call from my alma mater, Loyola Law School, asking if I would be interested in teaching a tax-exempt orgs class in an LLM program. And I knew the university had been looking at a tax LLM program. I didn't realize it was fully baked. And I said, "No, I want to get an LLM first."
Are you kidding me? That's how it happened.
And
Yeah.
okay, so my firm was very supportive, and we agreed to reduce my hours a little bit to allow me to get to evening classes on time. And, going back to school, I took notes in law school on paper, and I went in with my notepad, and, everybody around me flipped open their laptop. So it was a it was a kind of a paradigm shift for me, but it ended up just being a great way to exercise the gray matter and become a subject matter expert.
Right on. When did you make the transition in-house?
So I made the transition in-house. Gosh, I was probably a 20-year lawyer when that happened. And it happened, I had wanted to do it for a while, but I live in LA. My husband's a practicing maritime lawyer in Los Angeles. So we always need to live near a port, and we would prefer the port to be LA and not New York. So, geography matters. And there's not a lot of openings for general counsel that just pop up particularly in healthcare in LA. But I had been working with a major public company that had a huge healthcare operation that encountered just kind of a regulatory and business crisis. And I got called in to lead the team on that. And I worked really closely with the general counsel, the deputy general counsel, and the executive team for over 2 years. I was at their facility probably 3 days a week over the course of 2 years, traveling with them to different locations and just working really closely as part of that team. And I loved that experience. They asked if I would be willing to come in-house at the end of the project. But the problem was that they were headquartered in a place that wasn't by a port. And so we couldn't really make that move. But it kind of intrigued me and piqued my interest. So I kept my eyes open. And the first in-house opportunity I had was with a healthcare system located in California that had never had a general counsel, and I had never been a general counsel, and they hired me. This could have been a disaster. But we learned together, and they were wonderful. It was a great experience. I built the legal department, and I credit that team, particularly the CFO, with giving me a lot of grace to learn how to become a legal executive. Because when you come out of a law firm where people are paying you by the hour, they generally don't want you to sugarcoat things. They want a straight shooter who's going to tell it like it is and do it quickly. That's not the way executives work, I learned. There's a diplomacy and a nuance that goes with being an executive. So learning to be and lean in as a legal executive was critical for this role. And again, they gave me a lot of grace to do that.
Wow. Yeah. So what did you do to, kind of master that new domain? Trial and error, or did you get a mentor or talk to others, or what all went into that?
So there was a lot of trial and error. I did a lot more reading on, sort of management styles and leadership styles so that I could do a better job of reading the room. I had to learn to keep my mouth shut, right? To resist the urge to interrupt, to resist the urge to say, but wait a minute, the law says, and sort of just learning and disciplining myself to show up and listen carefully, not to multitask, not to try to, in my head go three different places based on what they said, but just to listen, so that I can be more thoughtful in responding if I'm asked a question, or in weighing in a way that doesn't sound like, the lawyer's, the bull in the china shop. And I also, looked at the people I admired who I thought had good executive diplomacy, and tried to model some of the behaviors that I saw them entertain.
I think of you as quintessential general counsel. I've only known you in that role and with such executive presence. And so this is interesting for me to hear about your transition from law firm life to in-house. I didn't realize that that's the path it had taken.
Yeah.
What did your department grow into over the course of that role?
It grew into about a total of 6 attorneys. And then I also was responsible for risk management and compliance.
Okay.
So yeah, and I think one of the other challenges is, you can't build an in-house team the same way you would build a law firm, because they're not the same beast. So, learning that, you go in-house, you don't have all the bells and whistles of a law firm, right? You don't have nobody's going to hand you Lexus. You've got to fight to get that in your budget. You don't have these sophisticated document management systems. And, we didn't have pleading paper. So we were really, you learn to be creative. I found out that during that time, I'm a member of the Hawaii Bar.
Yep.
And if you are a member of the Hawaii Bar, they actually give you free access to a Lexis-like database for all federal and state cases. So, I had to learn to look for those kinds of things so I could pull in those resources for the team.
Wow. Very scrappy. Yeah. Great. So tell me about, during this period of time, what were some specific challenges that you faced and how'd you overcome them?
I think one of the challenges of being in-house is you're stuck with your client, right? So if you're in private practice and you have a client that's kind of a pain, you get to turn to another client, or you can sort of decide that maybe you won't take the next project, or you can ask a partner, hey, you may have a better personality fit for this client, or you can just say, my rate just went up, and see if that drives them away. You can't do that when you're in-house. So you need to identify the folks, or I needed to identify the folks that, we weren't gelling, and either figure out how to gel or how to live and peacefully coexist with mutual respect. You don't have to like me, but we got to work together. And that makes it sound like I didn't get along with a lot of people, which is not true. But there's always going to be someone who is going to be, the pain, or that you don't jive with, or that just kind of has a prejudice against lawyers. So that was challenging, because it required me to really focus on, gee, am I emotionally intelligent, and how can I improve where I'm not? And I think that was the first time I ever in my life thought about emotional intelligence as a quality and a trait that needed to be nurtured.
Okay. Yep. And what did that mean for you personally?
I reverted to a lot more listening and a lot less talking, a lot of reading on emotional intelligence, which again was something that was not, on my reading list before, and modeling behavior of people who I thought had high emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. At some point, you go back to a law firm.
I did 2 stints as a general counsel and just decided it was time for a change, and looked around, and there weren't any general counsel openings that were a good fit for me or wouldn't require me to move. So I thought, I'm going to go back to private practice. I've learned a lot that I think would make me a better outside advisor, because I know how it works on the inside. And that was a lot of fun, and it was a break. It was a nice break to not have the business pressure. It was a nice break to not, have the same client all the time. So it felt like a holiday in some respects and an opportunity to, during that time, I got admitted in Massachusetts so that I could do some work with the Massachusetts Hospital Association. So things like that that I did. I did more speaking, working with some trade associations on some educational materials. And you don't really have the time to do that in-house because in-house you're trying to save an outside spend, and that means the more you can do the work inside, the less you spend on outside counsel. So it was really fun, and yeah, I don't regret going back to private practice. I think it ended up being a really good career move in terms of my emotional well-being, my professional skill set, and my mindset as well.
How did you go about selecting where you would go?
By this time, I pretty much knew who all the players were that I worked with, that I respected, that I valued, and that I thought were wicked smart in the healthcare space. So it wasn't hard to identify the firms that I might be interested in. And a lot of them, I had either been the client or been across the table or been on the deal team. And lawyers move firms. So there were plenty of firms where my former partners were now partners. And so I was fortunate. I had a lot of options. The economics are hard when you go from a regular salary back into a law firm where your production and your business development determines your salary. So there was a ramp up and that was, I'd forgotten, the grinding, the minding and the finding is hard. It's still hard.
Yeah.
But fortunately my former clients from my in-house days said, well, we'd like to use you and keep you on some of these projects. So that made for a nice ramp.
And then tell me how having spent all those years as a GC informed your advising as an outside counsel.
Lawyers love to give advice that sounds like lawyers, right? We were raised that way in law school. That's how we analyze problems, and we want every detail to matter. But I think my experience in-house framed my thinking about it's not just about being a good lawyer, but giving the client what they need to either make a decision or do the deal in a way that they can understand it. Because my sense, having been in-house, is when a lawyer says in a memo or an email, yes, you can, but clients never read past the but. So it really framed my thinking and my practice around new projects and really taking the time to talk with the client about what the project would look like, what they wanted the end product to be. Did they want a memo? Did they want, a PowerPoint that they could share? Did they, and sometimes, with the general counsel, maybe they want a memo for the law department, but they want a business friendly, shorter version of the memo in bullet points that they can share with their colleagues who are not lawyers. So really spending the time at the front of the engagement with the client to talk about the process and also about gating issues. If we do A and the answer is 1, then where do we go? And if the answer is 2, do you want to just stop and take a pause and reevaluate so that we weren't running up bills because I was chasing down things to make sure I covered all the bases? Instead, asking them, what bases do you want to cover and in what sequence do you want to cover them?
When the Cedars position came open, Cedars is such a historical, storied institution and esteemed institution in Los Angeles. How did that role come about? And did that feel a little bit like the universe was conspiring in your favor right here in LA?
Very much so. I got a phone call about it and I went home and I told my husband that Peter Braveman, my predecessor who had been in Cedars for over 40 years, was a legend among the general counsel community in California, was retiring. And I said, I think I know who's going to apply for this position, and I'm not going to get this position because I know who's applying for it, but I'm going to throw my hat in the ring because I've never done work for Cedars-Sinai. That's one client that was never the portfolio of the firms I was with. And it'd be really fun to meet these people and get the perspective and learn a little bit more and understand the challenges of the kind of academic medical center that Cedars-Sinai is. So it was a long and grueling process. It was many months, many interviews. And when I got the offer, I was literally couldn't believe it. I'm thinking, I don't know what happened here. How did this happen? And I remember saying that to a friend who's a partner at one of the big national law firms. And she looked at me and pulled me aside and she said, "Don't you ever talk like that. No man would ever question why they got what they deserved." And that has stuck with me. She has been a mentor. And I thought it's so true. We women tend to, underestimate ourselves and engage in this self-deprecating humor. But she reminded me that I was not being a good role model when I talked like that. So it was a big moment though.
I'm sure with your background and everything you had done up to that point, they were as excited to get you as you were as excited to get the job, right? I mean,
Well, I hope so. And I so enjoyed meeting people. And some of those folks I had met because I had been involved in deals where Cedars was a part of the deal and we had been across the table or we had been at meetings. So, I was excited about working with the team. The board is amazing and thoughtful and mission driven. And that really resonated with me. I think that for me, always being interested in nonprofits and always having a soft spot for nonprofit healthcare, Cedars is the epitome of walking the talk when it comes to mission and, being good stewards, but also being incredibly valued resources to the community they serve.
and how has your development of your team been during your tenure at Cedars?
I inherited a fabulous team, and we've grown the team since I've been there. When I arrived at Cedars, there were some silo groups of attorneys that weren't reporting to legal, and we've coordinated all of that so that we have dual reporting relationships in some areas, but we've sort of coalesced all the lawyers so it's a little less siloed, which is great. And we've spent a lot of time sort of organizing ourselves. When I came in, it was all paper files. And so, we made a big effort to get organized and adopt a electronic document management system like a law firm would have. And that has just been terrific. And we implemented it just before COVID, which was fabulous because when COVID hit, our CEO said, "Look, if you're not clinical, stay home. Get out of our way and let the clinicians deal with this." And had we not gone to a paperless environment, we wouldn't have been able to work remotely. And
Right.
we've stuck with that because now we spend time out at our affiliates, grab the laptop and go, and we can actually sit and be part of the affiliate management team for the day and be available to them. And that's been a game changer for the team.
Wonderful. Um, when you're bringing somebody into Cedars, uh, a younger lawyer, let's say, what are you looking for?
We're looking for someone who has an interest in and some familiarity with healthcare. I wouldn't say we're necessarily looking for someone who, you know, is a deep subject matter expert, but somebody who has a lay of the land and an interest, because that's the person who's going to care about why these crazy, extensive regulatory requirements matter and how we can work with them. Also, I think it's someone who understands that in-house comes with trade-offs, right? You are never going to have the upside potential that you're going to have as a partner in a national law firm, which you go in-house with a nonprofit. We don't have equity to give you. But you are going to have a real sense of purpose. You are going to have the comfort of a regular salary. You are going to have the opportunity to do some cool things like influence policy and, work with people who are saving lives every day. Another one that I think is important is you need to understand, as we talked about, that you're going to have one client now. And so you need to get comfortable with and be willing to learn about the culture of that client, how they view lawyers, how they like receiving information, how they like meetings to occur. Are they okay with a virtual meeting, or are you always going to have to go to their office? So someone who understands that it's just different than working in a law firm.
Well, great, Terri. I would love to hear about what you're most looking forward to.
I think in healthcare, there's so much to look forward to. It's a challenging time. We have the continuing challenge of, being expected to do more and get paid less for doing it. We have labor shortages, making it hard to fill the nursing positions and other positions that we need to operate. But at the same time, healthcare is starting to recognize that things like price transparency are mandatory. You can't expect consumers and payers to make good choices about their healthcare if they don't know what it's going to cost. So I think that's exciting and is going to be a game changer in our industry. I'm getting to the point where I'm looking at retirement, not too distant future. And so I'm really excited about my team. I'm so thrilled that I see people, all of my team members could take my job and do it well. And when I came in, that was my goal because there was no in-house candidate when I came in. And one of my goals was when I retire, I want there to be a lot of in-house candidates for my seat. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited we have a new CEO. We had a fabulous CEO who was there for a total of over 40 years, who recently retired, and his legacy is remarkable. And our new CEO has just great perspectives and is willing to question, why have we always done it this way? So that's exciting and has been just really fun to work with him and get to know him and experience what his vision for our health system's future is.
Excellent. Should we add the 2028 Olympics to the list of things we're looking forward to here in Los Angeles? I know you're working with the Olympics in some capacity. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we are a sponsor, which is very exciting. And look, we treat people. That's what we do. And so the opportunity to provide care for athletes that are performing at the highest level is an exciting challenge for us. And we're really looking forward to that, as well as just being a partner with many organizations that are using the Olympics as an opportunity to showcase what a remarkable city Los Angeles is and what tremendous resources and values we have as a community. So we are very excited about that.
Great. Well, Terri, it's really been a pleasure speaking with you today. I thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate the time.
Take care. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed our time with Terri. I know I did. A few key things I'll take from this episode are how important it is to work hard and commit to excellence early in your career. That means being willing to sacrifice your time and commit to zero defects when honing your craft as a lawyer. Second, I was impressed by her commitment to developing the lawyers on her team so that they are viable candidates to be her successor when she decides to retire. That's the kind of leader people want to work for. Okay, until next time, this is Joe Scholl. For more tips on accelerating your path to becoming a world-class general counsel, visit InsideCounselAcademy.com and connect with me directly on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Becoming the GC. Whether you're preparing for the GC role or looking to sharpen your skills as a sitting general counsel, we hope this episode offered valuable insights and inspiration. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your colleagues and friends. Explore more resources and join our community at InsideCounselAcademy.com. Please tune in next time for more insights and inspiring stories from successful legal leaders.